The rude millionaire bullied everyone in the cafe until a new waitress finally put him in his place. The Sugar Maple Cafe buzzed with the kind of controlled chaos that only came with a Tuesday brunch crowd. Clinking silverware, hiss of the espresso machine, and the low murmur of conversation filled the warm air. Sunlight streamed in through tall, spotless windows, painting golden rectangles across the linoleum floor. And then he walked in, wearing a $4,000 pinstripe suit and a smirk that had ruined more days than the weather. Preston Hale pushed open the glass door with the authority of a man who believed the world owed him something. 45, trim, hair swept back like he'd stepped out of a TV courtroom drama. Except this wasn't fiction. This was real. And he was a menace. He didn't need to say anything. His arrival alone sent a ripple through the room. Heads ducked, shoulders tightened. The waitstaff froze for half a second before instinct kicked in. "Oh no. He's early today," whispered Claire, a server in her late 30s with tired eyes and an apron stained with coffee rings. "God help whoever gets his table," muttered Trevor, the dishwasher, glancing through the serving window. They all knew him. Every local did. Preston Hale, investor, mogul, and self-appointed king of Maple Ridge. He owned half the businesses on Main Street and acted like he owned the people too. He always sat at the same booth. Window seat, third from the left. And he always ordered the same thing, with one subtle change he wouldn't reveal until after it was served. It was a game to him, a power trip. And this morning, he was in rare form. "Where's the coffee?" Preston snapped as soon as he sat down, snapping his fingers, loud, sharply, as if beckoning a dog. His voice cut through the air like a blade, silencing nearby tables. A young server named Cody rushed over, nervously balancing a pot of fresh brew. "Good morning, Mr. Hale. You were just not fast enough," Preston growled. "You've got one job, pour the coffee." Cody's hand trembled as he filled the cup. A few drops spilled onto the table. Preston stared at the stain. His eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, he shoved the cup off the table. It shattered on the tile like a gunshot. The cafe gasped. "Clumsy little punk," Preston spat. "Clean it up before someone sues you for being incompetent." No one moved for a moment. Then Cody, cheeks red, crouched to pick up the ceramic shards. His hands were shaking. Across the room, behind the counter, a new waitress stood watching. Her name was Emily Granger. 27. Quiet eyes, chestnut hair tucked behind one ear, and a calmness about her like the still before a storm. She'd been hired just 2 weeks ago. No one knew much about her. Just that she moved here from out west and didn't say much about her past. She held a notepad in one hand, the other gently tightening around the neck of a warm coffee carafe. She watched Preston, not with fear, not with anger, but with something else. Stillness. Something was different about her. He hadn't noticed her yet. Bullies rarely notice quiet people, not until it's too late. She stepped out from behind the counter and walked slowly toward his booth. The hum of the cafe faded. All eyes turned. Preston Hale was about to meet someone who wouldn't flinch, wouldn't cave, wouldn't play his game, and it would change everything. Some people use money to build walls. Others use courage to knock them down. This is the story of how one quiet woman taught a man that respect isn't bought, it's earned. Before we begin, if you're enjoying our stories, please consider liking this video and subscribing. It helps us keep creating more. Now let's dive in. Emily placed the carafe gently on a tray and approached Preston Hale's table with slow, deliberate steps. Her shoes made soft taps on the floor, like a drum roll no one noticed but her. Preston barely looked up. He was too busy typing furiously on his phone with one hand, while checking his reflection in the back of a spoon. Emily stopped beside his booth. "Good morning," she said calmly. "Would you like a refill?" Preston glanced up, eyes scanning her like a barcode. "Who are you?" "Emily. I started last week." He gave her a look that said, "I don't care," without needing the words. "Well, Emily, make yourself useful. My coffee better be black, hot, and in my hand before you blink." She poured without flinching. The cup filled quietly. No spills. She nodded and stepped back, saying nothing else. Preston didn't thank her. He never did. Claire had warned her on her first day. "Listen, you're going to see some things here. That man out there, Preston, he's bad news. Owns half the town and thinks that gives him a license to be a jerk. Just do your best and don't get on his bad side." Emily had nodded, thanked her, and gone back to polishing glasses. What Claire didn't know was that Emily had seen this kind of man before. She grew up with one. A stepfather with power, charm, and an explosive temper. The kind who smiled for the neighbors and shouted behind closed doors. The kind who made you question if you were the problem. She knew the signs. The sarcasm. The dismissiveness. The slow, cutting way they picked people apart. Preston took a sip of his coffee and scowled. Too hot. Emily didn't react. She simply said, "It'll cool in a minute," then walked away. It was the first time anyone had walked away from him mid-complaint. He stared after her, thrown off. At the counter, Claire gave Emily a wide-eyed look. "You okay?" Emily just smiled softly and nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay." Around them, the regulars pretended not to notice what had happened. But they did. They always did. The cafe staff had lived in silent submission for years. Cody, the young server, still had burn marks on his self-esteem from Preston's weekly tirades. Trevor, the dishwasher, once had to mop up coffee Preston had thrown at him because the cream wasn't almond milk. No one ever said anything. No one wanted to lose their job. Preston knew that. He thrived on it. But Emily wasn't like the others. She wasn't interested in surviving his approval. She was watching, waiting, and something inside her was quietly taking notes. Preston Hale had built his empire on fear, arrogance, and unchecked power. But this time, he'd underestimated the wrong waitress. And the balance of power in Sugar Maple Café was starting to shift. The cafe was packed. Booths were full, plates clattered, and the air smelled like grilled bacon and cinnamon pancakes. The noise was lively, but tense. There was a heaviness underneath it all, like people were holding their breath. Because Preston Hale was back. And this time, he wasn't alone. He sat at his usual booth, flanked by two men in expensive suits. One of them, Tommy Lang, ran the local bank. The other was a younger guy with slicked back hair and a Rolex, so shiny it reflected sunlight into people's eyes. "You ever think about franchising this place, Preston?" Rolex guy asked. "You've got that influencer crowd now. Make it Hale Cafe or something. Sell the brand." Preston leaned back like a king on his throne. "I could, but I enjoy watching the little people squirm too much." He laughed loudly. So did the suits. A few feet away, Emily was clearing a table. Her eyes flicked over to him just once. She didn't flinch, but she heard it. So did Claire, who was filling waters at the table behind them. Her hand trembled slightly. "What's wrong with this town?" Preston continued loudly. "Is that no one knows their place anymore. Everyone wants to be a hero, but no one wants to work." Emily set a syrup bottle on a tray a little too firmly. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Preston snapped his fingers again. "Emily," he called. "We're ready to order." She walked over calmly. "Not slow, not fast. Just steady. We'll start with appetizers. But for the love of God, no butter on my toast this time," he said. "Is that something your brain can process?" Emily blinked. The cafe went quiet. People turned slightly, pretending not to eavesdrop. "Yes, Mr. Hale," she said quietly. "And don't forget the lemon wedge. Last time, your boy Cody forgot and nearly ruined my entire day. I had to see my chiropractor, thanks to that stress." Laughter at the table, but the kind that felt mean. Emily took their order without reacting. No eye roll, no visible emotion, but something simmered under her calm. Claire burst in, whispering like a kettle about to boil over. "He's worse today? He keeps dragging Cody and Trevor into it too. Said Cody's shirt made him lose his appetite. Said Trevor smells like failure." "This is sick, Em." Emily wiped her hands on a towel. "Why doesn't anyone say anything?" she asked. "Because he owns the building. Because his cousin's on the zoning board. Because people have rent, kids, and medical bills," Claire said. Her voice cracked. "And if we speak up, we're gone." Emily nodded slowly. She understood, but her jaw clenched ever so slightly. She knew how fear worked. It started as a whisper, and if you let it grow, it would steal your voice. Preston's voice rose again. "No avocado? What do you mean no avocado? I come here 3 times a week, and now you're telling me you're out? This is basic stuff, people. It's not rocket science, it's brunch." Emily stood by the counter, watching. Cody looked on the verge of tears. The manager, Larry, stood in the corner pretending to read an invoice. "Do you know how much money I bring into this place?" Preston bellowed. "I should own this booth by now." He slammed his fist on the table. The entire cafe went silent again. Emily stepped forward, but Larry got there first. "Mr. Hale," Larry said, his voice low and shaky. "We can comp the meal if that'll help." Preston waved him off like a fly. "No, you'll do better than that. I want her off my table." He pointed at Emily. "I don't want to see her face again." Larry hesitated. Emily stared at him, her hands clenched into fists behind her apron. Larry turned to her. "Emily, maybe just take the back room for the rest of the shift?" The moment landed like a punch. The cooks peeked out from the kitchen. The regulars whispered behind their menus. Claire's mouth fell open. Emily didn't say a word. She simply nodded, took off her apron, and walked toward the back. Not in shame. In silence. The kind of silence that meant something was coming. Emily sat alone at a small metal table, the hum of the fridge the only sound. Her eyes were focused, her breathing calm. She wasn't angry. She was ready. She pulled a small notebook out of her bag and flipped to a page near the back. Names, dates, incidents. She'd been documenting everything. For 2 weeks. Because some people wait for justice. And others build it. Emily sat with her back straight, shoulders relaxed. Eyes focused on the small spiral notebook in front of her. The buzz of the cafe still hummed through the walls, but in here, it was calm. Focused. She flipped through pages, all filled with neat handwriting. She had documented every incident since her first shift. Dates, times, names. Exact phrases Preston had used. Staff reactions. Customer witnesses. Some pages had bullet points. Others had sketches, diagrams of the dining room layout. Arrows showing how hot coffee had been deliberately spilled too close to a server's hand. Claire walked in quietly and sat across from her, still wearing her apron. "You're not like the rest of us," Claire said softly. "I mean that as a compliment." Emily looked up, smiled a little, then turned her notebook around so Claire could see it. "What is all this?" Claire asked. "Evidence," Emily said simply. "You said people don't speak up because they're afraid. I get that. But fear only works if there's no record. If everything's just, he said, she said. This," she tapped the page, "is harder to ignore." Claire looked from the pages to Emily's face, then asked, "What did you do before this?" Emily paused. Then she smiled again, distant, thoughtful, almost like she was remembering someone else's life. "I used to work for an employment law firm. Assistant case investigator. Small firm outside Houston. I gathered testimony, interviewed staff, built harassment reports for court." Claire blinked. "You were a lawyer?" Emily shook her head. "Not quite. I wanted to be. Started night school. But then, life happened. My mom got sick. I had to take care of her full time. When she passed, I just needed a change. Something quieter. Something simple." Her voice softened. "I thought maybe a cafe would be peaceful." They both laughed, softly, bitterly. "But I didn't forget what I learned," Emily added, tapping the notebook again. "Especially not about men like him." Young Emily, maybe 19, sat on a couch holding her mother's hand. In the kitchen, her stepfather yelled into the phone. His voice was cruel and familiar. Every sentence was a threat. Her mother whispered, "You don't have to be afraid of men like him. Not forever." Emily squeezed her mother's hand, swallowing her fear. "I'm not afraid," she whispered back. And she meant it. Emily closed the notebook and looked at Claire. "I don't want to embarrass him. That's not the goal." "What is the goal?" Claire asked. Emily's voice was steady. "Accountability." She stood up, slipped the notebook back into her bag, and adjusted her name tag like a soldier tightening their armor. She wasn't going to stay silent. She just had to wait for the right moment. And that moment was coming fast. The weekend rush had packed the cafe wall to wall. Families, regulars, tourists. The air buzzed with warmth and chatter until the glass door opened. Preston Hale strode in, dressed in sharp navy, wearing sunglasses inside, like a man waiting to be admired. He didn't look around. He expected the room to notice him. And it did. Only today, something felt different. The staff didn't flinch as hard. The regulars didn't look away. There was a quiet current of anticipation, like everyone was waiting for something. Preston slid into his usual booth, flipped open his phone, and waved a hand without looking up. "Coffee," he snapped. Emily was already halfway there. Calm, composed, holding a carafe of fresh brew. She reached the table. He didn't even glance at her. "Black. Hot. This time, don't screw it up." Emily poured carefully, no spills, no shaking hands. She set the cup down and said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "Mr. Hale, we need to talk about your behavior." He looked up slowly. The cafe fell silent. "You need to what?" Emily didn't blink. You've harassed nearly every employee here. You've thrown drinks, insulted staff, and tried to get me removed because I wouldn't bow to your tantrums. He leaned forward, smiling like a man who thought he still had the upper hand. You're a waitress. I'm a millionaire. You don't talk to me. You listen. Emily reached into her apron and pulled out her notebook. She laid it gently on the table, flipped it open, and turned it to face him. Dozens of dates. Names, descriptions, quotes, diagrams, documentation. I've recorded every incident, every insult, every time you belittled, degraded, or endangered someone in this cafe. It's all here, she said. And I've already emailed copies to our regional labor board and the local news editor. His smile faded. Gasps rippled through the tables nearby. Emily didn't stop. I also included a statement about your threats to staff. And I cited the section of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act regarding hostile work environments, in case you're unclear on federal protections. A woman from the corner booth gasped. A lawyer, sitting quietly with her brunch, raised her eyebrows in approval. Preston's hands clenched on the table. You think this is going to hurt me? He hissed. No, Emily said softly. I think it's going to help them. She gestured around the room. Staff members had gathered at the kitchen door. Claire stood front and center, apron still on, eyes shining with tears. Cody next to her. Even Larry, the nervous manager, had stepped forward. You've used fear to control people for years, Emily said. But fear only works when people feel alone. And now, she stepped back and raised her voice. We're not alone anymore. For the first time in years, Preston Hale looked small. Truly small. He glanced around the cafe. He was used to people shrinking from him. But not today. They were staring. Standing taller. Claire crossed her arms. Trevor the dishwasher stood at her side. Even Larry, who had once backed down, stood firm. A customer near the front pulled out their phone and started recording. Preston stood up abruptly, face flushed. You don't get to do this to me, he said, jabbing a finger at Emily. No, Emily said, voice clear. You don't get to do this to us. Silence. Thick and final. Preston's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, he had nothing to say. Then, with a growl of frustration, he turned and stormed out of the cafe, the door slamming behind him. The bell jingled once. Then quiet. Then applause. It started at the back. A slow, rising cheer, hands clapping, dishes rattling. Claire let out a whoop. Cody laughed. Trevor grinned and tossed his towel in the air. The whole cafe erupted. Emily stood still in the center of it all, calm, solid. A lighthouse in the middle of the storm she had ended. Larry approached Emily as the rush faded. I don't know what to say, he said. I should have stood up sooner. I'm sorry. Emily nodded. You're standing now? That counts. Are you going to quit? After all this? Emily smiled. Not yet. There's good work to do here. Preston Hale wouldn't be back. Not for a long time. His reputation was in question. His investors were calling. His name was trending, for all the wrong reasons. And the people he thought were beneath him? They were finally rising. All because one woman refused to stay quiet. The Sugar Maple Cafe was busier than ever. But something had changed. The tension that once clung to the place like steam from the espresso machine was gone. The air felt lighter, laughter came easier, conversations felt warmer. And the staff, they stood taller now, spoke louder, smiled more. At the center of it all was Emily. Still in her apron, still pouring coffee. But now, she was more than just a waitress. She was the woman who stood up, and everyone knew it. A local newspaper sat on display. Waitress stands up to local tycoon. Community applauds bold act at Café. Below the headline, a photo of Emily, mid-pour, calm and focused, had been snapped by a customer. Her name was everywhere now. But she didn't chase the attention. She just showed up for work. Because that's who she was. Emily sat across from Larry, the manager, who looked nervous but excited. You've got options now, he said, handing her a folder. I heard the mayor's office wants to meet you. And a nonprofit called Voices of the Service Industry offered you a role in advocacy training. Even a local lawyer wants to help you finish your degree. Said your report was better than most legal interns could have done. Emily blinked. That's a lot. Larry nodded. It is. And you deserve it. He paused, then added, also, I'd like to offer you something too. Emily raised an eyebrow. I want you to be our floor manager, double pay, full benefits, and full authority to set staff conduct standards, including how customers are treated. Emily's eyes widened slightly. You're serious? Larry nodded. You reminded me what this place should be, and I want you leading it. She smiled. Okay, I'll take it. Emily walked through the dining room now like she belonged, because she did. She paused to check on a table of elderly women, helped Cody restock sugar packets, gave Trevor a thumbs up from across the room. Claire caught her eye and smiled. Feels like a different place, doesn't it? Emily nodded. It feels like it can breathe again. In contrast, Preston Hale sat alone on the patio of a nearly empty golf course. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Emails had piled up. His PR team quit. His investment partners were re-evaluating the brand. The board of the local commerce council had asked him to step away for a while. His empire hadn't crumbled, but the cracks were deep and loud. For the first time, he was being seen for who he really was. And he hated it. But deep down, something else stirred, a thought he hadn't allowed before. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was the problem. The cafe emptied out. The lights dimmed. Emily sat at a booth by the window, sipping a cup of tea. Claire slid in across from her. Feels good, doesn't it? Claire said. Emily nodded. It does. You think he'll ever come back? Maybe, Emily said. But if he does, he won't be the same. And we won't be either. Silence sat comfortably between them. Then Claire leaned in. Thank you for doing what the rest of us were too scared to do. Emily met her eyes. I wasn't braver than you, she said. I was just tired of staying quiet. Emily stepped outside, locking the door behind her. The town was quiet, bathed in soft orange streetlight. Crickets chirped somewhere in the distance. She looked up at the sky for a long moment. This town wasn't where she thought she'd rebuild her life. But now, maybe it was the perfect place after all. Not because it was peaceful, but because she'd made it better. One act of courage at a time. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Maple Ridge Community Center. A long table was lined with coffee, pastries, and smiling faces. A big banner hung across the back wall. Voices of the Service Industry, Regional Workshop. At the podium stood Emily Granger. Confident, poised, no apron. Today, she wore a soft gray blazer over a black dress, her name printed on the welcome packet as Director of Worker Advocacy. She scanned the room. Dozens of service workers filled the seats. Waiters, hotel clerks, baristas, housekeepers. People who knew exactly what it felt like to be overlooked, underestimated, or pushed too far. Emily leaned into the mic. Some of you came here today thinking you're alone in what you've experienced. You're not. You're not weak, and you're not the problem. You just haven't been given the space to fight back, yet. A wave of nods moved through the crowd. I used to serve coffee in a small-town cafe. One customer thought his money gave him the right to control people. But what he didn't know was that silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes, it means someone's getting ready. The audience went still, listening, moved. He didn't just help me find my voice, Emily said. He helped me help others find theirs. Applause erupted. Behind her, a slideshow started. Photos of local employees in training sessions, employee rights posted on cafe walls, small businesses implementing dignity codes. Emily hadn't just changed a cafe, she'd started a movement. Across town, Preston Hale sat quietly in a modest coffee shop, nothing flashy. He wore a polo shirt and jeans now, no sunglasses, no briefcase. He stirred his coffee slowly, looking out the window. He wasn't rich anymore. After the lawsuits, the board removals, and public exposure, much of his empire had been stripped away. But he wasn't angry. He was quieter. He hadn't spoken to Emily since that day. But sometimes, when he read about her work in the news, he felt something unfamiliar. Respect. And maybe a trace of regret. The cafe thrived now. Known across the region not just for its pancakes, but for how it treated people. Every staff member had health care. No one worked doubles without breaks. And on the back of every menu was a message. Every guest deserves kindness, and every worker deserves dignity. On her desk sat the original spiral notebook, worn, dog-eared, priceless. Emily picked it up, flipped to the first page. A quiet smile tugged at her lips. She closed the book and looked out the window, where a new group of trainees was arriving, young, hopeful, unafraid. Sometimes our greatest enemies help us discover our true strength. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about transformation. And courage? It doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply refuses to sit down. Thank you for watching and being part of this story.